So why it is not introduced into the clinic? I try to get access to laser therapy, but it is not easy in an oncotherapy clinic to arrange all of these things. But I think that some resistance existing in the medical field, and our common effort has to be devoted to decrease this resistance. But interestingly, the laser technique has been put into the focus because of super lasers, because of high power lasers, and maybe it has a feedback effect as well as for other laser technique use application as well as. But it is as well as very important that high power lasers can be used for completely different purposes, because it's technology allows now light focusable intensities can be achieved 10 to 21 or 22 watt per quadrat centimeter, which cause really highly relativistic energies if the electrons are removed, if the normal structure, atomic structure, destroyed and the electrons removed from the atomic orbitals, and they can be accelerated, and this process can lead to produce different ionizing beams like this. The hot electrons are released from the thin solid foil by a focused, very intense laser, and this is a plasma in which the different charged particles are separated, and due to electrostatic procedures, finally hot electrons or the fast electrons, ions, can be generated for other purposes. Which are these purposes? For example, production of isotopes for PET examination. The positron emission tomography gains recently more and more area, because it adds a lot of information to the additional information to the normal morphological images, which can be achieved by volumetric imaging techniques like CT or MRI, and it helps us to in the diagnostic, in differentiate of different tumors, differentiation in between tumor and side effects, for example, necrosis in the follow-up. It allows to detect the tumor response on different therapeutical methods, to detect the angiogenesis, to detect the cellular proliferation, the hypoxia of the tissues, which, for example, has high importance in radiotherapy, that we can define sub-volumes, for example, hypoxic sub-volumes, which we treat now with technique, allow us to differentiate, not homogeneously irradiate the target volume, but inhomogeneously plan inhomogeneously dose distribution, deliver planned differentiated dose to the hypoxic subvolumes, and so on and so on. So it has a lot of advantage, and unfortunately the isotope production is going down. There are atom reactors and cyclotrons which are closed now, and the need is huge, the need is growing, and the production is going down. For example, these are images in combination with PET and MRI. The PET provide us, the MRI provide us the morphological images. We can see the eyes, the brain, and the tumor, and the FDG MRI, the FDG PET, positron emission tomography, give us further metabolic or other informations. There are the most important positron emitters which are used, and if there could be actually the 18 fluoride which can be transported, so it can be generated at a certain place, for example in Debrecen in Hungary, and it is transported to Budapest or to Szeged. So it has a half lifetime which is enough for some hours to be used for larger distance. But for example, the oxygen or the carbon ion can be used only where it is generated. So these examinations, which are very important because, for example, amino acids can be for amino acid metabolism, carbon ion or oxygen can be used, and because of the short half-life, it can be used only in certain places, and we lose a lot of information having only fluoride. So all of these positron emitters are produced either by a cyclotron or a generator, but if the laser technique will be available and in one room it can be with the plasma technique produced, then it can be dedicated to each hospital, and everywhere the PET-CT technique can use all of the type of positron emitters. And the most important for me, and I shall speak about the rest of this morning, the cancer therapy with laser-induced ionizing radiation, which give us laser-induced photons, very high energy electrons, protons, carbon ions, protons with charged particles, protons and carbon ions, with very advantageous absorption feature, the Bragg peak, I shall speak about later it, and we will see the possible application area of this. So this was the first part, and should I immediately, or we have the break after the second one. So shall speak about the history of do you have any questions? Because I did not mention other techniques which were already discussed in details during this Lamelis. Which were these techniques? Optical coherence tomography, OCT, I think that one morning or one afternoon was this topic, and dentistry application, it was as well as discussed in details. So we go further with radiotherapy, which is a completely new discipline in comparison of the disciplines of internal medicine or surgery, which are more 1,000 years old. This is only 150 years old, because in at the end of the 19th century, the Röntgen or X-ray irradiation was discovered, and we used joule per kilogram as unit for the radiation, which is energy absorbed by mass. And the absorption causes ionization, which forms free oxygen radicals, and it causes direct or indirect changes in the macromolecules. In the macromolecules, lipids and amino acids can occur as well as free radical production and other large changes, direct DNA break, for example, but finally all of the reactions, all of the biological reactions is based on these changes. Proteins, enzymes, lipids, membrane proteins, and DNA in the nucleus can be changed, and it causes metabolic regulation and membrane changes or DNA changes, which either can be repaired or the cell will damage and it will be not capable to proliferate or will die directly. And at the very first part of the radiation, the cytokine production, so different molecules are produced in the cells and they are causing inflammatory reactions, edema and vessel wall changes. This is what we call acute reaction during the radiation, and later on the cells will die, and this causes necrosis or the die of a certain tissue which was irradiated. This is occurring both in healthy tissue and in cancer tissue. And all of the research in radiotherapy is focused on looking for differences in between normal tissue and normal cells and cancer cells from the point of view of the radiation response, and to enhance this difference and to selectively destroy cancer cells and maintain the function of the normal cells. The biological effects are depending on different cellular factors like cell cycle, space of the or place of the different cell, oxygenization. It is evident because we need oxygens for the free radical formation. These are oxygen radicals. The regeneration capacity of the different cells and intrinsic radiosensitivity. And if I consider not only cells, but really a human being, for example, this small boy yesterday, I have to take into consideration the whole human being, the age, the nutritional status, the other diseases, the previous treatments, and so on, and so on. A lot of things I have to take into consideration if I consider or plan radiotherapy treatment. I have to know whether this patient anemic, what are the organ function of the different organ, liver, kidney, and so on, what type of comorbidity, for example, diabetes mellitus, are all influencing the effect of radiation. And I have to focus on tumor as well as, because the effect and the treatment outcome is depending on the tumor size, the spread of the tumor type, and the different factors of the tumor. More recently, the molecular factors came into the focus of the research, and we can distinguish and we can make subgroups of tumors on the basis of the different molecular patterns. And of course, the effect is depending on radiation quality, doses, fractionation, combination, and so on. The main aim of the radiotherapy is to cure the patient, to destroy the tumor, to with a good quality of life, maintaining the organ and its function. Or sometimes, if we cannot achieve that, we know it already in advance, then at least we would like to achieve a symptom release, a pain release, or other symptom decrease of the bleeding, and so on. This is called palliative treatment, palliation. And the price for that is always the side effects, because actually we do not have radiation which does not touch at all the normal cells. We don't have actually a cell-targeted radiotherapy method, so always normal cells are involved, and acute reaction, both acute reaction, which are all, in the majority of the cases, has a good recovery occurred, but they are very unpleasant and causing suffer for the patient, so we have to fight against them as well, and especially the irreversible late sequels which cannot be cured, the scar tissue building, ulcus, organ function deterioration are decreasing the quality of life of the patient, and the tumor induction, we should not forget about it, that ionizing radiation always have a potential for second tumor induction. And finally, what we can analyze always at our research is really going on for improving the therapeutic index, which means that achieve better tumor response with the price of less toxic effect. And how it has been developed, I would like to show in the next 30 minutes. So after the discovery of the X-ray, already 7 months thereafter, it was tried, just tried. No very detailed scientific detection, scientific work, only they have tried, and it turned out that it was, even the patient name was noted and recorded, that Rosalie's breast cancer has improved remarkably by a medical student. Nowadays, is there any student who may apply anything for a patient? I don't think so. And we will see that there is no sense, because there were a lot of publication, there were some publication on success. Know that already 4 years after the discovery of X-rays, skin cancer were successfully cured, and palliation of malignant deep-seated tumors. And it was interesting because it was a deep-seated sarcoma which was irradiated during 1.5 years, regularly. And it was successful, it was reported successful, but few success and a lot of damage has occurred. So unfortunately, without animal experience, human beings gave us the negative results, and it was really some tragic deep ulcers due to skin ulcers or skin atrophy which cannot be changed, and hardening of the muscle. The patient was not able to move at all the neck because it was so hard, like a stone, and so on. So there were a lot of side effects which occurred sometimes some months or some years after the radiotherapy, and it was of course detected and came into the mind of the doctors later. But it led to the development of radiobiology, and finally they have found out the better method of treatment only on empirical way. So this is one of the first irradiator. You can see several limitations. There is only one field size, very few direction of the field, and only some kilovoltage, some hundred of kilovoltage photon energy, and the kilovolt photon energy absorbs always at the surface. So for breast cancer, maybe it was not so bad, but something else you can see in this picture. Do you think that this guy, this doctor, was a long-living guy? No. Yes, there were no real rules of radio protection. And it is not only in the very last past. I have a patient, 70 years old. She was working as a radiologist, and she has 4 cancer types. So we are treating her, and this was already some decades ago, 4 or 5 decades ago, that the radio protection rules were not so strict, and it may occur. And we can see that really the ionizing radiation is invisible but dangerous and has a long-lasting negative effect. So this is again another treatment type. Because of this very superficial absorption of the beam, a thin lead layer could give a good shadowing of the good protection of the surroundings. So here is a little hole, and this lady was treated through this hole, and the other part of the field was protected by this lead layer. The discovery of radioactivity of the different elements was in the same time. 1 year later, Becquerel has detected the uranium radioactivity, and thereafter there came the Curie couple, and the brachytherapy was introduced as well as very quickly after the discovery. And unfortunately or fortunately, the Standard Chemical Company has started its activity in 1930, which was on one hand very good for brachytherapy, but on the other hand it was abused. The radioactive elements was put in water, and it was sold to the normal population that it makes you younger and better and so on. So it was awful consequences it resulted in. And another important step is the increase of the energy of the photons with auto-voltage machine, and you can see that with auto-voltage machine already several direction and several field size could be used, so a little bit more parameters could be changed. And do you think that it is a very old technique? It's still existing in our department, and we are still using it for benign lesions, for arthrosis irradiation. And when I started my career, it was used as well as for palliation of cancer. So it is not so old technique. Everything is, and we have we have used the dermapan as well as for skin tumor irradiation, or this 200 or 250 kilowatt auto-volt machine, which I have made these photos 1 year ago here, and still the machine is there. But if it was used for deep-seated tumors, it caused really awful consequences of bone necrosis and muscle and surface necrosis because of the superficial absorption. And because of this lot of side effects and lot of suffer, the radiobiology started to work its activity, and Rigaud and Coutard, two French pioneers, has established the use of fractionation. Stenquist defined the Ellis formula, which included already the fractionation effect, number of fraction, and the time of the radiation. But unfortunately, it was the biological endpoint was the skin erythema, which is an acute effect. And I have mentioned that the acute effect is reversible. So we have to focus on late effects. But this early pioneering work led to introduction of fractionation schemes and the detection or establishment of knowledge on radiobiological processes. You can take a seat because I have still almost 30 minutes. So, and it was discovered as well as that the different tumors has completely different response to the radiation, different sensitivity to the radiation, and the different normal tissue has as well as different reactions. And some type of fractionation schemes has been introduced, which is still used. The conventional fractionation means that daily 2 gray is delivered, and the total dose, if it is 70 gray, how many days will be? It is only a vacuum. 2 grays per day, 70 gray total dose. How many days?
35.
Exactly. It means how many weeks for the patient? Because only working days?
8 weeks.
7.
7.
7. Yes. Yes. It's time to awake you. Yes. And this is the conventional fractionation which is still used and is proved to be empirically useful. This is a reasonable time, not 1 year or 1.5 years as the pioneers have used the radiation, but in 1 month or in 2 months the radiotherapy course could be finished, and with acceptable side effects during the therapy and few late sequences. We try to maintain the probability under 5% of serious late events. And recently there were some different fractionation schemes tried and used on the basis of linear quadratic model. I think that Dr. Naomi will speak about that. This is a modern formula which replaced the Ellis formula, which based on the detection of the biological endpoint of late responding effects. And going further in the technical development, finally the cobalt unit and electron generator accelerators became available in the middle of the last century, and the cobalt unit was still existing here as a second. The last week it was transported and finally stopped, but we have used only for radiomanageable experiments recently in the last 10 years. But there are still a lot of countries, in India for example, or Asia, where patients, I can say majority of the patients still irradiated with cobalt unit, which has a cobalt source and mechanical devices to put it into the opening of the beam, and it is irradiated from 60 or 80 or 1 centimeter or 1 meter distance the patient. Multiple fields could be used, and we started, even me, in the very beginning of my career, somehow to make a cross-section on the patient with different methods. This was, for example, a contouring device. I put this part here, and it was projecting, and we have drawn the different organs and the tumors into it, and manually the physicists have planned the dose distribution. In the 60s, only quadratic collimators can be used, but could be used. So we have not to change already the tubes, but mechanically the different collimators resulted rectangular fields, and 3-4 field technique could be used. And even we were able to design some protectional lead or Newton material to protect some part of the quadratic fields, and with that technique quite a lot of success could be achieved. What I have done could be achieved in the radiotherapy in the last decades. This is a metal pouring, metal fabricating or block fabricating process. This is some 10 kilogram blocks which had to be put always in the head of the linear accelerator, of the cobalt unit, or later on the linear accelerator SRS. And this was a huge step of the development of simulator, which is an X-ray machine, which allowed us to simulate the fields of used in the patient. And this is the simulation images. We can put markers, visible markers, and the patient tumor irradiation was planned with these manually accessible methods. In the 90s, linear accelerators with multi-leaf collimators were developed with 360-degree possibility of turning the gantry around the patient, the collimator inside, and form two-dimensionally the beams, the fields, and on that basis, and with the help of the different volumetric imaging, CT and MRI imaging, especially CT, the 3D conformal radiation could be introduced using multiple fields, and much more accurate dose distribution, homogeneous dose distribution could be achieved in the target volume, in the tumor, and with much larger protection of the surrounding tissues using these multiple fields. And this technique has been developed, and nowadays the intensity modulated radiotherapy is completely standard, everywhere used, and the stereotactic radiation of small lesions in the brain was introduced in the 60s and developed further, and nowadays extracranial stereotactic can be used for small lesions in the lung, in the liver as well as, and it is supplemental supplemented with onboard imaging, which called image-guided therapy, which allow us the accurate delivery of the radiotherapy. And with the photons and electrons, which are used for conventional radiotherapy, reach their maximum technical development. It is not possible the linear accelerator-based technique to develop further. Now we can use 3 to 15 MeV photons, electrons in the same range up to 20 MeV, and the dose rate has been increased up to 10 gray per minute. And it is important because we will see the difference, and this is the major difference in between the classical linear accelerator-based techniques and in laser-driven techniques, the dose rate, which is not expressed in gray per minute, in laser-driven technique by gray per second, and gray per 10 minus 10 seconds. So you can see the difference of the magnitude, but the classical radiotherapy development was continued with the therapy, with introduction of hadron therapy. And the hadron therapy and all of these measures resulted in a much better targeting of the tumor. Meanwhile, decrease of normal tissue toxicity and increase of the therapeutic index. You remember the therapeutic index of it there. However, these techniques requires much more work, much more time and energy consumption because the patient should be properly positioned, immobilized. This thermoplastic mask or vacuum bags are used for immobilization. Proper imaging and image fusion should be applied in order to, because if we able to deliver the dose, the energy to mass, you remember, the energy in a sub-millimeter accuracy, we have to detect the tumor with sub-millimeter accuracy. We have to define the target volume with this accuracy, and we have to make from a living organ, which can be moved like this, and the organ inside can be moved as well with breathing and other things. We have to make a geometrical body, not to move more than 0.2 millimeter. So it is a hard task, and we have to perform a lot of procedures for that. So the imaging and the image fusion, and thereafter the 3D planning, and the very accurate and controlled dose delivery with different techniques, with brachytherapy, with teletherapy, using extracranial stereotaxia, IMRT, helical tomotherapy, volumetric arc therapy, and hadron therapy, all of them with image guidance, real-time imaging during the delivery of the radiotherapy. I think that I don't go in details of the planning, which is already done in interdisciplinary collaboration, because each radiotherapy unit has a radiation physics and medical physics department where the dose is calculated so that the target volume, the prescribed dose in the target volume or in the sub-volumes of the target. You remember which method could us give some information on defining sub-volumes with higher cell number or hypoxic regions? Which was this imaging method? PET CT, exactly. So we're using with different methods, we can define undifferentiated or inhomogeneous dose distribution, and the physicists choose the technique, the field numbers, field size, the energy, the particle, and so on, and wedges and modifying parameters to achieve this, or they use the other planning softwares, inverse planning softwares, which we don't go in details, to define the as optimal dose distribution from the point of view of the target volume and organs at risk as possible. The plan evaluation is done together with the physicist, and finally we can evaluate numerical, graphical, and visual data to defining the coverage index of the target and the conformity of it and the homogeneity. And part of the calculation, the measuring of the dose and controlling of the device and controlling of the dose delivery to the certain IMRT method is as important. So you can see the different detectors which can be used, which should be used in a regular basis for quality assurance and quality checks. These dosimeters are used in different phantoms, which can be a standard water phantom or a solid water phantom or anthropomorph phantom. Recently it's possible to make an anthropomorph phantom of each patient directly, individually. And these are special devices for dosimetry, for hadron therapy devices. And finally, with all of these measures, what could we achieve? Using radiosensitizers, we could decrease the dose which is necessary to achieve the tumor elimination, and with proper fractionation and with increase of spatial selectivity, we could reduce the side effects of a certain dose, and it means that we can open the therapeutical window, we can achieve much better cure of the patient. And finally, we go from the conventional radiotherapy to the nuclear particle use, which means charged particles, protons or p-mesons, with very high physical selectivity due to the special absorption features, that these particles are going into the material in a certain way with a certain kinetic energy, and depending on the energy at a certain depth, they give the energy immediately. It will be absorbed in a narrow range, and it is called Bragg peak. And therefore, this Bragg peak is both the entrance dose and the dose behind this Bragg peak is absolutely negligible. So if it can be well planned, it gives us a much more selectivity than the conventional photon sources, and especially if it is combined with high linear energy transfer particle, like neutrons, but it's not very important, like charged particle, like heavy ions, carbon ion, for example, it will cause a high physical selectivity and higher relative biological effectivity. This is the proton depth dose curve. You see that a very low entrance dose and absolute nothing after the Bragg peak, and this is the same for carbon ion. Meanwhile, the carbon ion has 3 times higher biological effectivity, less dependence on the oxygenization, because it is a very densely ionizing particle. You can see that this is the ionization path of the carbon ion in comparison of the protons, and meanwhile, the protons causing isolated lesions and acts indirectly via free radicals, the very dense ionization, the high LET, high linear energy transfer radiation cause clustered regions, less repair, and more damage and better biological effectivity. And you can see that only one beam can cause in the depth a good dose distribution, and especially if it is combined with a scanning technique and so on, it can be really used for a large variety of tumors, and it can be enlarged, and it was done in the past at the beginning of the proton therapy, when only such like cyclotrons have been developed for that purpose. It has been started as well as quite early in the 50s already, but only recently in the past decades the technique has been developed so that several proton therapy and hadron therapy units could be more than 40 established and constructed and maintained and used for therapy. These are eyeball simulating applicators gold, it is from gold, and the inner surface contains ruthenium or iodine isotopes. It was used for treating eye melanoma, but in a certain, this is the melanoma, developed within the eyeball, and it turns out that there is a certain limitation with ruthenium or iodine radiation, especially if this tumor is located very close to the nervus opticus, to the nerve which responsible for the visual accuracy.